following program on Ada Derana 24 is classified for general audience. It is intended for all ages. It contains little or no violence, no strong language, and little or no sexual dialogue or situations. The following program contains opinions of the participants and does not reflect the views and beliefs of the Derana Media Network. The network believes in a safe space for all ideas to be expressed without any censorship and on its duty to create such a platform for free speech. Viewer discretion is strictly advised.
A very good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for joining me once again on another episode of Get Real, where we speak to notable newsmakers in our country, abroad, anywhere else in the world, in order to get an understanding as to a different side of the story that is at hand. But tonight I thought, let's analyze what's going on in our country, try to get a viewpoint that may not be exactly in the mainstream media. So to make sure that you get that take as well. For that, tonight I'm joined by senior journalist Mohan Samaranayake. He was also the former Director General at the Government Information Department. Good to see you once again, so thank you very much for being here. Appreciate it. Yesterday was May 1st, and we saw lots of the usual propaganda about May Day rallies where political parties go into various parts of the country, hold these rallies where they want to showcase the power of their politics. Now, I was looking at all these political events that was occurring yesterday, and the rhetoric that came out, the speeches that came out, the things that they said, the way it happened, it did not really tell me that apparently these leaders of ours knew that there was a complete unrest in our country just 1 year back, where people were telling these politicians, we don't like the way you are governing, we don't like the way the system is going. But yesterday it was like business as usual. Everybody has forgotten about it. It doesn't seem like our politicians have learned any kind of a lesson.
Yes. My view is that it was a display of empty rhetoric.
Yeah, exactly.
For example, everybody knows that we are, as a country, we are going through the most turbulent times in our post-independence history.
Yeah.
In terms of economic crisis, political, social, and geopolitical pressures. On any of the stages yesterday, I didn't notice an iota of concern about this crisis, how that crisis was created. What were the root causes of that crisis? What went wrong during the journey after independence? It was only empty rhetoric and promises, humiliating and insulting their political enemies. I don't suggest that on a May Day stage rally that you have to have an academic, very profound analysis of economic and situation and other factors, but at least to touch upon the basic fundamental truths behind this crisis. No, it didn't happen.
Do you think that we can actually get out of this crisis with this same lot? Because we don't see new proposals, we don't see new thinking, we don't see any kind of push by these leaders to take Sri Lanka into a completely different type of a nation. Like if you example-wise Mahathir Mohamad in Malaysia, Lee Kuan Yew in Singapore, they took a position and they said not anymore. we're not going to do this, we are going to change. And they changed the entire nation. They changed the thinking of the people. We don't see that. Do you think we are really in a crisis because we don't have any political push to change the narrative of this nation from a beggar's nation to a developing nation?
Yes, correct. To my answer to your first question, I doubt very much whether we can go ahead with the current political formations. It is highly doubtful. As I said before, last year, the Sri Lankan state collapsed. Government collapsed. There was almost total anarchy in the country. And there were severe geopolitical pressures from different corners. I don't see any in-depth analysis of these factors on the part of any political formation, political party. Without a proper reading, a correct reading of the situation, how can you go ahead? We need to have the right vision and the right program to salvage this country from the economic and political quagmire that we have been pushed into.
The current crisis is an economic crisis. The economic crisis, most of these economic pundits say, is because of the exuberant amount of loans we took and the wrong policies we implemented, not just in the past few years. I don't think there was any kind of economic policy that was implemented that was credible enough to help the downfall of this country. I think for the past 75 years, we've been doing the wrong thing. And if you can tell our viewers, tell us, where did we start going wrong? Because if you look at the good old 50s, the 60s, where at that moment we were a force to reckon with in the world, people wanted to know, other nations wanted to know what Sri Lanka is thinking. We had some kind of tremendous amount of power. But right now it looks like as if we lost all that and we are begging, we are literally begging from the world. Who put us there, and actually more importantly, what put us there?
Okay. This is how I see it. After independence, for some time until 1956, this is my view, we didn't have a political and economic vision that take this country up on the economic ladder, on the development path. But since 56, there was an attempt at least. Whether that attempt was successful or not is a different story, that there was an attempt. My belief is that nowhere in the world a country has reached a considerable level of economic development without having its own production economy. That is the essence of the crisis that we are facing. For example, such a debate was on in the 19th century in the United States, now the number one economy of the world. During that debate, once celebrated President Abraham Lincoln, he said, I don't remember exactly the words he said. These are generally the words he used. I don't know much about tariff, but I do know this much. If we buy goods from abroad, we have the goods, they have the money. If we produce the good that we want in this country, we do have both the good and the money. That was the economic strategy followed by the United States to become the world's #1 economy. Though they now preach liberalization, open economy, so on, they, including the United Kingdom, United States and other West European countries, during their development process, they were very, very protectionist states. For example, during the time of the President Ronald Reagan, almost in parallel to Margaret Thatcher in the United Kingdom, he was a pioneer in promoting neoliberal economic model. But it was during his time, very severe protectionist measures were adopted to safeguard its own economy. So the point is this: for any country to reach a higher level of development and economic growth, it has to have its own economy. It is in parallel to that process that it has to get integrated with the rest of the world.
This idea, what you're saying, and what apparently America did in the past, is a very simple idea. If I sell you something, I get money, and if I buy something, you get money. That's the simplest way. Now, that particular theory we failed to implement for our nation, because for some reason somebody started telling us, no, do not sell, keep buying, which means we became importing economy. Now, from the 80s onwards, we opened our economy, everything started coming in, we started buying, not producing. Now, this is the result. But do you see, now that is the problem, that is understood. Right now, what we are doing is addressing that problem, because it doesn't look like as if we are turning our economy from an importing one to an exporting one. There are a little bit of attempt, but it's not a mindset change, because still we look for the imported products when we go into the supermarket. It's not the local one. Local one is not so much something that you want to use. But so there is no push by the leaders to change the mindset of the people, even the consumer. So what do you think, like right now, are we applying solutions or patchwork?
Okay, this is my answer. Now I would like to start with an example. In 1959, Japan introduced a new car to the US car market, automobile market. It was called Toyopet. It was handsome, and fuel consumption is less. But this particular motor car couldn't penetrate into the US market. Then the advice that came from the economists and advisors in the United States to Japan was, look, you cannot produce automobiles. Leave that to us. You do what you can do. So the rest is history, Mahieash.
Yeah, exactly.
If Japan heeded to that opinion, what could be Japan's level of economic development now? So in our country, what I see is that after independence, especially after 1956, we adopted the then popular economic strategy, which is known as import substitute economic development policy. At a certain point, it failed through. But what we have to do was to identify what went wrong and rectify these mistakes. Instead, what we did was we accepted that advice that came from the rich countries for their own benefit, and we destroy our infant national production economy that emerged during late 50s, during 60s and 70s. By mid-70s, in this country, we did have a fairly good textile industry.
Yeah.
There were large-scale textile factories in Mineriya, Tulhiriya, Puvugoda, Veyangoda, so on. Where are they now?
I remember when I was small that I remember this newspaper headline, which my father used to always buy, and it said that apparently President Premadasa was celebrated in Bangladesh because he opened a couple of factories in Bangladesh, and he was garnered. I think that entire village was named after him. So we were so vibrant that we can go into other countries and open up that type of textile industry and support them.
Yes. Recently, I saw a media report in one of the leading newspapers. Seed and Plant Material Association had at a press briefing says that Sri Lanka annually spends 20 billion rupees to import dry red chilies. What do you say? Is it not ridiculous? Absurd.
It is.
In this country, we have water, we have land, we have traditional and modern agriculture.
And that plant is not hard to cultivate.
Yes. So how can you develop yourself without using your own material, own resources? So that is what has happened. So when during the United Front government from 70 to 77, yes, it failed in terms of certain things. Then we, without analyzing what has gone wrong, we accepted what was imposed on us by the hegemonic countries, hegemonic economies.
Can I ask you this question very quickly before we go in for a break? You just said 20 billion to import chilies. Somewhere down the line, somebody conned us. Instead of telling, why are you buying this? You can cultivate it here. No, somebody did that. Who do you think did that to us? Instead, started telling this lie, you can import. And the bill went to 20 billion. Nobody put any kind of, there was no regulations. There was no, nobody's trying to make sure that certain steps have been taken to not make that happen. That entire money is going out of the country. So where do you think it went wrong?
That is why I said at the very beginning of this discussion, almost all the political parties that had made a release in Colombo yesterday do not have the right, correct vision. I'm not talking about socialism. This is not socialism. I'm talking about national capitalism. This is what Mahathir Mohamad did in Malaysia. This is what the authoritarian rulers in South Korea did. That is how all these countries reached a very high level of economic growth and development. So the main reason is that we didn't have the vision, so we failed. So last year in 2022, there was a massive crisis. And what were the main reasons? We didn't have enough foreign exchange.
Yeah.
Where does foreign exchange come from?
Exporting.
It doesn't fall from the sky. So you have to produce and you have to export. And the other thing, you have to produce whatever you can do here, you have to cultivate whatever you can cultivate here, then you save foreign exchange, restricting, limiting, reducing imports.
But now the IMF is proposing completely against that. And that's where the question keeps coming back, and we are asking from these so-called economists, how are we to solve a problem that started with too much of imports by basically taking that restriction away again and start importing again. So obviously in another 5, 10, God knows when, but number of years, we will be back again in the same predicament. Let's take a short commercial break. I'm in a conversation with senior journalist Mohan Samaranayake. Once we come back after the break, I want to talk about and analyze what happened in the Aragale of last year. What exactly happened, what is his take on it, and what are the things we can learn from it as we move on. This is Get Real. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone. This is Get Real. I'm in conversation with senior journalist Mohan Samaranayake. My apologies for coughing in the middle of the discussion, having a very bad cough, which is seems to be going around. Mr. Samaranayake, now last year, the so-called infamous Aragale that basically defined is defining Sri Lanka's history. We saw initially, in my opinion, people were angry, not just in Colombo, all throughout the country, because they were not getting their basics. No fuel, no gas, no electricity. These are just like the basics of having a quality life. And it kind of alerted to these people all around the country, saying that living in Sri Lanka is miserable, because apparently our leaders were not doing enough in order to rectify the matter. We didn't have money, the negotiations needs to go on with various countries, whether to take a loan or not, all that drama. Then when the people were actually rising against the politicians and telling them, we're not happy with what you're doing, there were so many nefarious agendas starting to piggyback on this pain of the people. They initially thought, okay, this is our opportunity to get rid of whatever or whoever that we want to, because they were very much in that mindset, in my opinion, since we won the war. So they actually came into the foray and took control of this entire narrative, where people were, because the people's pain did not have any kind of leadership to take it. The political parties were not taking any kind of notice and giving leadership to that particular pain of the people in order to change the narrative, because they were more interested in harnessing some kind of benefit for them. If it is the opposition was more interested in gaining the power and becoming the government. If it's the government wants to make sure that it's not their responsibility, put the blame on someone else. So you see that happening. Now, what is your take? Because there's a lot of elements who took control of this situation and finally completely took us into a place where we never wanted to be. I don't think people of this country would have ever chosen to chase a president away. The only method they would choose to chase a president away would be through elections. But we saw this very ugly scene, which was basically coming from the Arab Spring and all these kinds of, like Libya, all these countries was happening here. What is your take on that?
Very, very complex issue. You at the beginning said in this segment the infamous Aragale or the struggle. Though you used that word, Mahieash, recently on the first anniversary of the violent mob trying to enter the former president's private residence, in one of the leading newspapers it was said that it was a people's uprising. And in another English paper, a writer was saying that was spontaneous. That struggle was spontaneous. And last year, when the Aragala crowds were chased out from Goldface Green, a large number of academics, doctors, professors, so on, issuing a statement, said called it a people's movement.
Let me also add, the US ambassador was very clean to say it's peaceful protesters.
Yes, peaceful, but an elected MP was brutally killed on the road. So, but still there are people who call it peaceful.
Because the reason they are calling it peaceful is because they are part of it. So when you're part of it something, you're not going to take the negative side of things.
During the so-called struggle or Aragale, I saw in several leading Sinhala newspapers, they call it in Sinhala Premani Adarani Aragale. This is how that is why I said at the beginning, this is a very complex issue. So there is no doubt people were angry because you don't have fuel, no electricity. In certain days it was 12-hour power cut. Then there were gas tank explosions. So many harsh difficulties that we were going through. So yes, people were angry. And in addition, I need to say, in certain countries where similar struggles took place, there were geopolitical forces behind it. One example, there are a number of examples, not one. I will quote just very briefly only two. One is Chile. In 1970, in Chile, President was elected, whose name was Salvador Allende. He chose the socialist path of development, which angered the powerful country above, that is the United States. The US wanted to oust Allende from power, and what they did was to squeeze the Chilean economy. At one point, then US President Richard Nixon said, let the Chilean economy scream. So I believe, I don't have documented evidence, but I do have circumstantial evidence to make this statement. The economic difficulties that we experienced one after the other or one over the other were not spontaneous, they were part of a project. Yes, let me finish. Then because of these economic hardships and difficulties, people were angry. That anger was used by powerful forces who wanted to make Sri Lanka one of their hunting ground. Just one example. This country defeated LTTE terrorism in May 18th, 2009. In December 2009, the United States Senate Foreign Relations Committee prepared a report. The title of the report is Sri Lanka, Recharting US Strategy After the War. It's about 84-page document. In this report, the authors explain the importance of Sri Lanka as a developing country, as strategic situation, so on. After explaining all the importance of Sri Lanka for the powerful countries and the rich countries, it says in the introduction, the United States cannot afford to lose Sri Lanka. You can read.
What do you mean by that? Is it lose Sri Lanka per se as a friendly nation, or lose Sri Lanka per se as a location?
Yeah. What they meant was that Sri Lanka is getting closer to China, the economic rival of the dominant, powerful and rich countries. They very openly now say China is the long-term threat to the United States and other NATO countries. Then let me finish. Then in middle 2019, Heritage Foundation prepared another report in which it is said that after the regime change in 2015, yes, Sri Lanka's drift towards China was halted. Yes, it was controlled. The US developed very close relation in terms of economic, military and other matters with Sri Lanka. The report says if Rajapaksa government comes to power again in 2019, the United States have to rethink about its policy and strategy towards Sri Lanka.
So let me ask you this question. Now, lots of events happen from 2019 onwards. 2019, we see President Gotabaya Rajapaksa coming back to power, which means the Rajapaksas are back in power. 2020, COVID. Kind of completely, not only us, but the entire world is coming to a standstill. And then 2021, we get a warning signal saying that the economy is not going in the correct way. 2022, everything collapsed. Now, everybody was, even me, I was under the impression and the understanding that apparently because of COVID is the reason we are in this particular position. Let me ask you, in your analysis, do you think that the collapse of Sri Lanka's economy, or taking us to that particular point, to the brink of collapse, was a pre-planned thing prior to COVID? Or did these various forces that is against Sri Lanka's nationalistic narrative used the situation, used COVID for their benefit?
Yeah. Okay. Let me give you another example. In 2010, then government started a maritime security dialogue called Gold Dialogue. The inaugural discussion was, the guest speaker at the inaugural session was the chief of the US Indo-Pacific Naval Fleet. His name is Admiral Harry Harris. During his speech, he said, Sri Lanka is strategically and commercially important due to 3 reasons. Number 1, location. Number 2, location. Number 3, location. In 2015, after Yahapalana government came into power, in May 2015, then US Secretary of State John Kerry visited Sri Lanka and delivered a speech at the Kadirgama Institute, during which he said, Sri Lanka is the fulcrum in the Indo-Pacific region. So Sri Lanka is so important for their geopolitical project. For us to understand this bitter reality, we have to have some kind of idea as to what the international order in which we are living today. This international order is such that rich, powerful handful of countries are dominating the entire world. That world order developed after the emergence of capitalism in 1500 in the 15th century. But there were ups and downs. With the emergence of the Soviet Union after the 1917 revolution, that journey by the powerful and hegemonic countries to control the entire globe, humanity, was challenged. But with the demise of the Soviet Union in 1991, they started their journey to control the entire globe in the name of neoliberal globalization. So therefore, Mahieash, my answer to your question is, what happened in 2022 was pre-planned.
Indeed, when we keep thinking about, that's what I want everyone in this country to realize, that instead of believing BS that is being pushed down your throat by various mediums, do your own research and try to understand what's going on. Not just in Sri Lanka. Sri Lankans are so uneducated when it comes to global affairs and not understanding its impact. Recently, about a week and a half back, former Minister Vimal Weerwansa released a book called The Nine, The Hidden Story of the Aragalaya. There he makes certain calculations. He says these things happen. And he puts a lot of emphasis on the role of the US ambassador. The US ambassador Julie Chung, who managed to be at the center of this. We see prior to the Aragalaya, the government's behavior and the rhetoric is that we are not going to the IMF, we are not going to be friendly to one single nation, we are going to be in the middle. We're going to be China friendly, we are going to be US friendly, Western friendly, all that. We're going to develop our country. And that was the rhetoric. Soon after the Aragalaya, IMF is my God and there is no one else. That is the same government. There was no, even the people who was criticizing the IMF and the West started singing praises on this side. In the middle, you see the US ambassador's involvement. And we see this particular ambassador, unlike any ambassadors, which has been there in this country for, I don't know, for the past 75 years, openly violating our sovereignty and making sure that she pokes a finger to everything. And the best part of it is there are a set of people, Sri Lankans, who will defend whatever she does. She can do anything she wants. That's the level that has happened. Whether she violating the sovereignty of Sri Lanka, nobody cares about that. Not even our leaders. So that happened. What do you think about the role of the US ambassador in this entire crisis and up until now? Because apparently every single US official is here. The CIA is here. Every single administrative entity in the military side of the United States is here. And they're having discussions with our officials, and there is always this hidden thing that is happening which we are not aware of yet. What is your take on that?
Okay. Before that, I need to make an addition to what I was telling before. As you very rightly said, the COVID pandemic and the economic difficulties caused by it were used by these forces to aggravate the situation. It has happened in other countries where there were similar regime change projects were implemented. Okay. Then later, this meddling by the US ambassador in Sri Lanka, it is nothing new. Wherever there were a regime change masterminded by the hegemonic countries, the ambassadors of those countries played a crucial role. For example, I give you just one example. In 1979, the People's Democratic Party of Afghanistan was in power. That was friendly with the Soviet Union. We all know during that period, during the Cold War, there was an acute rivalry between these two camps, led by the US and the Soviet Union. When the PDPA government tilted towards the Soviet Union, the USA wanted to topple that government. They did it. under President Jimmy Carter's leadership. During that project, the U.S. ambassador in Kabul played almost the same role in toppling that government. It happened in other countries. If you remember, Mahieash, you are very young, you don't know, perhaps you may not know, in 1990, to be precise, on 2nd August, then Iraqi President Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait over a dispute over some oil field. 1 month before the invasion of Kuwait, the U.S. ambassador in Baghdad, a lady, April Glaspie, she met the Iraqi President Saddam Hussein and told him, if you have any dispute with Kuwait, you can sort that out the way you want. Saddam Hussein invaded his Kuwait. Then what happened? That was the beginning of the destruction of that 7,000-year-old civilization country. So this is not new to my knowledge. Yeah. The essence of this reality is that we are living in under a hegemonic world order.
How are we to get out of it?
It is very difficult, but I think it is something that can be done. Now, for example, at these days, at present, a new world order is in the making. There are attempts aimed at de-dollarization.
Yeah.
Number of countries are now joining this exercise, and under the guidance or the leadership of China and Russia, they have established in 2014 a new development bank which will be challenging the dominance of World Bank and IMF.
Is that led by China?
We cannot say led, but China on the lead is on the lead. The BRICS, the grouping which is called BRICS, and made of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. They have set up a development bank. It is called New Development Bank in 2014. That's a challenge to the dominance of the World Bank and IMF as dominant economic powers in the world. So we need to understand these tendencies and trends and adapt ourselves. We cannot fight against these powerful countries. We can go to fight with these powerful countries, but we need to understand what is happening here and abroad, and adjust our policies and strategies to suit them and safeguard our sovereignty.
That U.S. ambassador in Baghdad would have told Saddam Hussein, you can sort out your issue any way you like. In our case, it was like, can I pray for you, President? And kind of took over the whole thing. Yeah. And from that point, from that prayer onwards, it was collapsed. But I want to take, this is not the first time there is a regime change in Sri Lanka, led by the United States. President Mahinda Rajapaksa's failure for the third term was also a regime change operation by the United States, because back in, I think it was John Kerry himself who presented it to the House of Representatives, where he said that they have used around $250 million towards promoting democracy. That's the word they use when they are going for a regime change in Sri Lanka and a couple of other countries. How do you see, like, right now, a weaker Sri Lanka is more beneficial for the United States or the West. A stronger Sri Lanka is not. India's role in all this, how do you see that?
Yes, I would like to draw a parallel. When the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, the United States think tanks contemplated how to use their extra military power and resources to dominate the control of the world. Paul Wolfowitz, one of the then defense architects in that country, prepared a document in which he says Russia is the only remaining military power that can challenge the United States. So we need to weaken Russia. When the Russia is weakened, yes, that vast territory, the size of which is 17 million square kilometers, you can control.
Yeah.
You create, instead of one Russia, several small states within that vast territory. So what you said is correct. To the extent the country is weak, to that extent dominant powers can control that country and other countries as well. So I need to emphasize this. During the President Mahinda Rajapaksa's time, he played a significant role, we need to say. And really, as a result of the so-called Aragale, an historical injustice has been done to him. But at the same time, my opinion is that though he defeated terrorism, though he developed infrastructure, he failed to build a strong economic foundation. So that vacuum was used by the external forces to make use of the crisis created by the economic difficulties and COVID pandemic to implement the second regime change project.
Indeed, there's a lot to learn and try to understand what's going on. That is, despite the fact that we have a high literacy rate in this country, political knowledge, economic knowledge is really at a lower rate. That is something that people of this country should understand. It's not just living in your own home. You need to understand what's happening in Washington is affecting you. Decisions taken back in London is affecting you. So we have to be aware of what's going on and try to understand, are we going to dance to the tune of someone else? Or are we going to create our own tune? Senior journalist Mr. Mohan, Samaranayake, thank you very much. Appreciate coming here and explaining to us and educating us of what happened and what went on. Well, that's all the time we have for you tonight. Thank you very much for watching. I'll be back again on Sunday on State of the Nation. Thank you for joining. Have a good night.